Grandma's Jam Jar Inheritance. Grandchildren's Fight uncovers old extramarital affair. Hello, welcome. Leave a like, subscribe, activate notifications, and enjoy this story. In a quaint Midwestern town, a beloved grandmother's death sparks an unexpected treasure hunt as her grandchildren discover that her homemade jam jars hold more than just preserves. They're the key to unlocking a hidden fortune and buried family secrets that will change their lives forever. The small town of Millbrook, nestled in the heart of Indiana, was known for its close-knit community and its ability to keep secrets buried deeper than the corn roots that surrounded it. On a crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves danced in the breeze, the townsfolk gathered to bid farewell to one of their most cherished residents, Evelyn Rose Hawthorne. At 87 years old, Evelyn had been a fixture in Millbrook for as long as anyone could remember. Her cottage at the end of Maple Street, with its white picket fence and garden bursting with flowers, had been a beacon of warmth and comfort. The aroma of her famous homemade jams often wafted through the neighborhood, drawing in friends and family alike. As the funeral procession wound its way through the tree-lined streets, four figures stood out among the mourners: Evelyn's grandchildren. There was Michael, the eldest at 32, a successful lawyer from Chicago who wore his ambition like a well-tailored suit. Beside him stood Sarah, 29, a free-spirited artist whose colorful attire seemed at odds with the somber occasion. Then came the twins, Emma and Ethan, both 25. Emma, a local schoolteacher with a heart of gold, and Ethan, a restless soul who had never quite found his place in the world. The siblings walked behind the hearse, their faces a mosaic of grief, nostalgia, and an underlying current of tension that had been simmering for years. Michael's hand rested protectively on Emma's shoulder, while Sarah and Ethan trailed slightly behind, exchanging whispers that were lost in the sound of shuffling feet and muffled sobs. At the gravesite, as Reverend Johnson spoke of Evelyn's kindness and the legacy she left behind, the grandchildren's minds wandered to memories of summer afternoons spent in Grandma's kitchen. They could almost taste the sweet tartness of her strawberry preserves, feel the sticky warmth of freshly sealed jars, and hear her gentle humming as she worked her culinary magic. As the ceremony drew to a close and the crowd began to disperse, Evelyn's lawyer, Mr. Simmons, a man as gray and weathered as the tombstones surrounding them, approached the siblings. "Your grandmother left specific instructions," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "She asked that you all meet at her house tomorrow morning. There's the matter of her will to discuss." The grandchildren exchanged glances, a mix of curiosity and apprehension in their eyes. Evelyn had never been one for conventional methods, but even this seemed odd. "What about our parents?" Michael asked, always the practical one. "Shouldn't they be involved?" Mr. Simmons shook his head. "Ms. Hawthorne was very clear. Just the four of you tomorrow at 10. Don't be late." With that, he tipped his hat and walked away, leaving the siblings to ponder what their grandmother could possibly have in store for them. As they made their way back to their cars, the autumn wind picked up, sending a shiver through them that had little to do with the chill in the air. Each of them felt it, the sense that tomorrow would bring more than just the reading of a will. It would be the beginning of something that would change their lives forever. Little did they know that Evelyn Rose Hawthorne's last gift to them would be a journey through the past, a test of their bonds, and a revelation that would shake the very foundation of their family. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the emotional turbulence brewing within each of the Hawthorne grandchildren. They arrived at Grandma Evelyn's cottage one by one, each step up the creaky porch stairs laden with memories and unspoken questions. Michael was first to arrive, punctual as always. He stood on the porch, keys in hand, hesitating before unlocking the door. The house seemed smaller somehow, as if Evelyn's larger-than-life personality had been its true foundation. Sarah arrived next, her artistic eye taking in the vibrant fall colors of the garden, noting how they matched the palette of her latest painting, a portrait of Evelyn she'd never had the chance to show her grandmother. The twins, Emma and Ethan, pulled up together, their shared grief palpable in the air between them. As they gathered in the living room, the familiar scent of cinnamon and apples enveloped them. It was as if Evelyn was still there, about to walk in with a tray of her famous apple turnovers and a mischievous glint in her eye. The room was exactly as they remembered: floral-patterned sofa, doilies on every surface, and shelves lined with knickknacks and framed photos chronicling their family's history. At precisely 10 o'clock, Mr. Simmons arrived, his briefcase in hand and a solemn expression on his face. "Thank you all for coming," he began, settling into Evelyn's favorite armchair. "Your grandmother was an unconventional woman, as I'm sure you're all aware, and her will reflects that." The siblings leaned forward, a mixture of anticipation and anxiety etched on their faces. Mr. Simmons cleared his throat. "To my beloved grandchildren," he read, "I leave you my greatest treasure, not in gold or stocks, but in the fruits of my labor and the secrets of our family." He paused, looking up at their confused expressions before continuing. "In my cellar, you will find 365 jars of jam, one for each day of the year. These aren't just any preserves. Each jar contains a clue, a piece of a puzzle that, when solved, will lead you to your inheritance." A stunned silence fell over the room. Sarah was the first to break it with a nervous laugh. "Are you serious? Grandma turned her will into some kind of treasure hunt?" Mr. Simmons nodded gravely. "Indeed, Ms. Hawthorne was very specific. You must work together to decipher the clues. Only when the full mystery is solved will the true nature and location of your inheritance be revealed." Michael's brow furrowed. "This is ridiculous. We're adults, not children on a scavenger hunt. Surely there must be some legal way to dash." "I'm afraid not," Mr. Simmons interrupted. "Your grandmother made it ironclad. Participate in the adventure, as she called it, or forfeit any claim to the inheritance." Ethan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly perked up. "Well, I think it sounds exciting. Beats fighting over who gets the china set, right?" Emma nodded in agreement, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's so like Grandma to do something like this. Remember how she used to set up treasure hunts for us when we were kids?" As the siblings reminisced, Mr. Simmons stood up. "There's one more thing," he said, his tone becoming even more serious. "Your grandmother left a note. She said, 'The journey you're about to embark on will reveal more than just the location of your inheritance. It will uncover truths long buried and test the strength of your bond as family. Be prepared for surprises, and remember, the sweetest jams often come from the tartest fruits.'" With that cryptic message hanging in the air, Mr. Simmons bid them farewell, leaving the Hawthorne grandchildren to contemplate the strange task before them. As the door closed behind the lawyer, the siblings looked at each other, a mix of emotions playing across their faces. The weight of Evelyn's final game settled upon them, along with the unspoken realization that this was about far more than just an inheritance. Michael, ever the leader, stood up. "Well, I suppose we should get started. Shall we head to the cellar?" As they made their way to the cellar door, none of them could shake the feeling that they were about to uncover something that would change their lives forever. The creaking of the old wooden stairs seemed to echo their trepidation as they descended into the cool, dim space below. The cellar light flickered on, revealing rows upon rows of neatly arranged jam jars. Each one sparkled in the dim light, their contents a rainbow of colors: ruby red strawberry, golden apricot, deep purple blackberry. But it wasn't the jam that caught their attention. It was the labels. Each jar bore a date and a single word or phrase, written in Evelyn's distinctive handwriting. As they drew closer, the first jar's label became clear: January 1st, beginnings. The Hawthorne grandchildren exchanged glances, a mix of excitement and apprehension in their eyes. Whatever journey their grandmother had set them upon, it started here, with these jars of sweetness and secrets. Little did they know that the path ahead would lead them through a labyrinth of family history, testing their relationships and uncovering truths that had been carefully preserved for decades, much like the jam that surrounded them. The Hawthorne grandchildren stood in a semicircle, staring at the rows of jam jars that lined the cellar walls. The air was thick with the mingled scents of fruit preserves and musty earth, a fitting backdrop for the strange task that lay before them. Michael, always the one to take charge, reached for the first jar. January 1st beginnings, he read aloud, turning the jar in his hands. I suppose we should start here. Sarah peered over his shoulder. Look, there's something taped to the bottom of the jar. She carefully peeled off a small, folded piece of paper. With trembling fingers, Michael unfolded the note and read, where it all began. On a warm summer's night, two hearts entwined, hidden from sight. The old oak's branches, our sacred bower, whispered secrets in the midnight hour. The siblings exchanged puzzled glances. Emma was the first to speak. It sounds like a love poem? But why would Grandma leave us this? Ethan snorted. Maybe she had a secret admirer we didn't know about. Michael shot him a disapproving look. This is serious, Ethan. There must be more to it than that. Sarah's artist's I caught something the others had missed. Wait a minute, she said, taking the jar from Michael. There's something odd about this label. She held it up to the light, revealing a faint watermark in the shape of a tree. The old oak, Emma exclaimed. It must be referring to the big oak tree in the town square. Remember how Grandma used to take us there for picnics? Michael nodded slowly. It's worth checking out. But first, let's see if there are any other clues in these jars. They spent the next hour carefully examining each jar, finding similar cryptic messages attached to several of them. Some referenced local landmarks, others seemed to be fragments of old love letters, and a few contained what appeared to be coded messages. As they worked, the siblings found themselves falling into a rhythm, their earlier tensions giving way to a shared sense of purpose. They laughed over memories triggered by certain jam flavors and debated the meaning behind particularly puzzling clues. Finally, with a collection of the most promising leads, they decided to venture into town. The old oak in the square seemed like the best place to start. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as they approached the massive tree. Its gnarled branches reached towards the sky, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze as if whispering long-held secrets. So, what exactly are we looking for? Ethan asked, circling the trunk. Emma ran her hand along the rough bark. The clue mentioned hidden from sight. Maybe there's some kind of hidden compartment or... Her words trailed off as her fingers caught on something. A small, weathered metal plate was nestled in a knot of the tree, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Guys, I think I found something. The others gathered around as Emma carefully pried the plate loose. Behind it was a small cavity, and nestled inside was an old tarnished locket. With shaking hands, Sarah opened it. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to their grandmother. But it wasn't Evelyn. And on the other side, a man none of them recognized. What the hell? Michael muttered, voicing the confusion they all felt. As they huddled around the locket, trying to make sense of their discovery, none of them noticed the older woman watching them from across the square, a mixture of fear and resignation in her eyes. The discovery of the locket sent shockwaves through the Hawthorne siblings. They retreated to a nearby cafe, huddles around a table in the corner, voices low as they examined their find. This doesn't make any sense, Michael said, frowning at the photograph. This woman looks just like Grandma, but it's clearly not her. And who's the man? Sarah studied the image closely. The clothing style, I'd say this photo is from the late 1940s or early 50s. Look at her hairstyle, the man's suit. Emma chewed her lip thoughtfully. Could it be a relative? Maybe Grandma had a sister we didn't know about. Ethan leaned back in his chair, a mischievous glint in his eye. Or maybe our straight-laced Grandma had a secret wild side. An evil twin, perhaps. Michael shot him an exasperated look. This is serious, Ethan. This could be a clue to our family history. We need to approach this logically. As they debated, the bell above the cafe door chimed. The woman who had been watching them in the square entered, her eyes scanning the room before landing on their table. She hesitated for a moment, then approached. "Excuse me," she said, her voice quavering slightly. "I couldn't help but notice you at the old oak. You're Evelyn Hawthorne's grandchildren, aren't you?" The siblings exchanged wary glances. It was Emma who finally spoke. "Yes, we are. Did you know our grandmother? The woman nodded, a sad smile crossing her face. I'm Margaret Donovan. Your grandmother and I. We were friends a long time ago. She glanced at the locket on the table, and a flicker of recognition passed over her features. May I? Hesitantly, Michael handed her the locket. Margaret's fingers trembled as she opened it, tears welling in her eyes as she looked at the photograph. Oh, Evelyn, she whispered. After all these years. The siblings leaned in, their curiosity piqued. Mrs. Donovan, Sarah said gently, do you know who these people are? Margaret looked up, seeming to remember where she was. She took a deep breath. The woman in the photo, that's your grandmother's sister, Elizabeth. Her twin sister. A collective gasp went up from the table. Michael's eyes widened in disbelief. Twin sister? But that's impossible. We would have known if Grandma had a twin. Margaret shook her head sadly. It's a long and complicated story, one that Evelyn kept hidden for many years. But I suppose, if you found this, it means she wanted you to know the truth. She pulled up a chair, settling in with the weight of someone about to unburden themselves of a long-held secret. It all started in the summer of 1952. Evelyn and Elizabeth were inseparable, the belles of Millbrook. But they were as different as night and day. Evelyn was studious and reserved, while Elizabeth was wild and free-spirited. Margaret's eyes took on a faraway look. That summer, a young man named Jack Holloway came to town. He was handsome, charming, and married. Elizabeth fell head over heels for him, and he for her. They began a passionate affair, meeting in secret at the old oak tree. The siblings listened, enraptured by this glimpse into their grandmother's hidden past. Margaret continued, her voice thick with emotion. Evelyn discovered the affair and was torn. She loved her sister but knew the relationship was wrong. When she confronted Elizabeth, it led to a terrible fight. The next day, Elizabeth was gone. She'd run off with Jack, leaving nothing but a note behind. Margaret paused, taking a sip of water before continuing. The scandal rocked the town. Your great-grandparents were devastated. They made a decision. To protect the family's reputation, they told everyone that Elizabeth had died in an accident. They swore Evelyn to secrecy, made her promise never to speak of her sister again. The cafe around them seemed to fade away as the Hawthorne grandchildren grappled with this revelation. Their minds raced with questions, trying to reconcile this new information with the grandmother they thought they knew. But what happened to Elizabeth? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret shook her head. No one knows for sure. There were rumors over the years, sightings in distant cities, whispers of a child born out of wedlock, but nothing concrete. Evelyn searched for her sister in secret for years, but never found her. As Margaret's tale came to an end, a heavy silence fell over the table. The siblings looked at each other, shock and confusion written across their faces. Their simple treasure hunt had suddenly become something far more complex, a journey into a past they never knew existed, with implications they couldn't yet fathom. Michael was the first to break the silence. Mrs. Donovan, thank you for sharing this with us. But why now? Why did our grandmother set up this elaborate scheme? Margaret smiled sadly. Evelyn carried this secret for so long. I think in her final years, the weight of it became too much. She wanted the truth to come out, but on her own terms. And perhaps, she looked at each of the siblings in turn. Perhaps she hoped you might succeed where she failed, that you might find out what really happened to Elizabeth. As the implications of Margaret's words sank in, the Hawthorne grandchildren realized that their grandmother's jam jar inheritance was more than just a game or a treasure hunt. It was a mission, a chance to uncover long-buried truths and perhaps, in the process, heal wounds that had festered for generations. With newfound determination, they knew their journey was only beginning. The jars of jam waiting in the cellar held not just preserves, but pieces of a family puzzle they were now committed to solving. Little did they know, the path ahead would test their bonds, challenge their beliefs, and lead them to discoveries that would change their family forever. The revelation about their grandmother's twin sister had left the Hawthorne siblings reeling. They returned to Evelyn's house in a daze, their minds swirling with questions and possibilities. As they descended into the cellar once more, the rows of jam jars seemed to take on a new significance. "I can't believe we never knew about Elizabeth," Emma said softly, running her fingers along the jars. "How could Grandma keep such a huge secret all these years?" Michael shook his head. "She must have had her reasons, but now it's up to us to uncover the truth." Sarah picked up a jar labeled July 15th, Crossroads. She carefully removed the note attached to the bottom and read it aloud. "Two paths diverged in a yellow wood. One led to sorrow, one to good. The choice was made, for better or worse. Now find the letter, lift the curse." Ethan furrowed his brow. "Yellow wood? That sounds familiar." "It's from Robert Frost's poem," Emma explained. "You know, the road not taken. But what's this about a letter and a curse?" As they pondered the clue, Sarah's artistic eye caught something on the jar's label. "Look at this," she said, holding it up to the light. A faint outline of an envelope was visible in the watermark. Michael snapped his fingers. "The old post office. It's been abandoned for years, but it used to be right next to that grove of birch trees on Maple Street." With a new lead to follow, the siblings set out for the old post office. The dilapidated building stood as a relic of the past, its faded sign barely legible. As they approached, they noticed something odd, fresh footprints in the dust leading to the door. "Someone's been here recently?" Ethan observed, a hint of excitement in his voice. Cautiously, they entered the building. The interior was a mess of cobwebs and scattered papers. But there, on the old sorting table, lay a single envelope. It was yellowed with age, addressed simply to "My dearest E." With trembling hands, Michael opened the letter and began to read. "My dearest E, I write this with a heavy heart, knowing the pain I've caused. Our love was a beautiful dream, but one that could not last in the light of day. I've made my choice, and though it tears me apart, I must return to my family. I beg you to forgive me, though I know I don't deserve it. The memory of our time together will forever be preserved in my heart, like the sweetest jam in summer. Please live your life fully, find happiness, and know that a part of me will always love you. Yours eternally, Jay." As Michael's voice trailed off, a stunned silence fell over the group. The letter had answered some questions but raised so many more. "So Jack chose to go back to his wife," Sarah mused. "But what happened to Elizabeth after that?" Emma's eyes widened suddenly. "Wait a minute. The letter is addressed to E. What if it wasn't meant for Elizabeth at all? What if it was for Evelyn?" The implications of Emma's suggestion hung heavy in the air. Could their grandmother have been involved with Jack as well? The possibility added a new layer of complexity to an already tangled family history. As they left the post office, each lost in their own thoughts, none of them noticed the curtain twitching in the window of a nearby house, or the pair of eyes watching them with a mixture of curiosity and concern. The discovery of the letter had thrown the Hawthorne siblings into turmoil. They retreated to their grandmother's house, gathering in the living room to process this new information. Michael paced the floor, his lawyer's mind trying to piece together the puzzle. If the letter was meant for Grandma, it changes everything we thought we knew about her. Sarah sat curled up in an armchair, sketching absent-mindedly as she often did when stressed. But why would she keep all this secret? Why lead us on this wild goose chase now? Maybe she wanted to clear her conscience, Ethan suggested, sprawled on the couch. Come clean before she, kicked the bucket. Emma shot him a disapproving look. "Ethan, but you might have a point. This whole setup feels like Grandma's way of telling us something she couldn't say in person." As they debated, a knock at the door startled them. Michael opened it to find Margaret Donovan standing there, looking anxious. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said, stepping inside. "But I saw you at the old post office, and I think there's more you need to know." The siblings exchanged glances as Margaret settled into a chair. She took a deep breath before speaking. "The letter you found, I know about it. Evelyn told me years ago in a moment of weakness. It was indeed meant for her, not Elizabeth. A collective gasp went up from the group. Margaret continued, her voice heavy with the weight of long-held secrets. You see, both sisters fell for Jack that summer. Elizabeth's affair was passionate but brief. It was Evelyn who truly captured his heart. They carried on in secret, even after Elizabeth ran away. But Jack was torn between his love for Evelyn and his sense of duty to his wife and children. The siblings listened, spellbound, as Margaret unraveled more of their family's hidden past. In the end, Jack chose his family. The letter was his goodbye to Evelyn. She was heartbroken, but she understood. She never spoke of it again, threw herself into her studies, and eventually married your grandfather. Emma leaned forward, her eyes shining with unshed tears. But what about Elizabeth? Did Grandma ever find out what happened to her? Margaret shook her head sadly. Evelyn searched for years, but Elizabeth seemed to have vanished without a trace. It wasn't until much later that a clue surfaced, a postcard from San Francisco, postmarked 1965. It only said, "I'm sorry. I hope someday you can forgive me. E." As Margaret's tale came to an end, the room fell into a contemplative silence. The Hawthorne siblings were reeling from these revelations, their image of their grandmother forever altered. Michael was the first to speak. Mrs. Donovan, thank you for telling us this. But I have to ask, why didn't you tell us all this yesterday? Margaret smiled sadly. Evelyn was my dearest friend. I promised her I would only reveal what was necessary, when it was necessary. She wanted you to uncover the truth yourselves, to understand the weight of the secrets she carried. As Margaret prepared to leave, she paused at the door. There's one more thing. Evelyn believed that Elizabeth might have had a child, your cousin. She never had proof, but she hoped that someday the truth would come out. Perhaps that's part of why she set up this elaborate scheme. With that bombshell, Margaret left, leaving the Hawthorne siblings to grapple with the implications of all they had learned. Their family tree had suddenly grown a new branch, and somewhere out there, they might have a cousin they never knew existed. As night fell, they returned to the cellar, looking at the remaining jam jars with new eyes. Each label, each date, could be a clue not just to their inheritance, but to the whereabouts of their long-lost aunt and potentially an unknown cousin. Ethan picked up a jar labeled September 21st, New Beginnings, and carefully removed the note attached to it. As he read it aloud, a chill ran down their spines. In the city by the bay, where the fog rolls in, a new life began, free from family and sin. Look for the Golden Gate, and the bridge so grand. There you'll find the next piece, hidden in the sand. The siblings looked at each other, a mix of excitement and apprehension on their faces. It seemed their grandmother's jam jar journey was about to take them far beyond the borders of Millbrook, to San Francisco, the last known location of their Aunt Elizabeth. As they began to plan their trip, none of them could shake the feeling that they were on the brink of a discovery that would change their family forever. The sweet taste of their grandmother's jam had led them to uncover a past both bitter and complex, and the journey ahead promised to be just as complicated as the secrets they'd already unearthed. The fog rolled in thick over San Francisco Bay as the Hawthorne siblings stepped off the plane. The city's famous Golden Gate Bridge loomed in the distance, shrouded in mist, a fitting metaphor for the murky family history they'd come to unravel. So, where do we start? Ethan asked, adjusting his backpack. It's not like we can just wander around yelling, "Hey, long-lost cousin, you out there?" Sarah pulled out her phone, showing a map she'd marked. I've been doing some research. The clue mentioned the bridge and something hidden in the sand. I think we should start at Baker Beach. It's got a great view of the Golden Gate, and it fits the description. As they made their way to the beach, the siblings couldn't help but feel the weight of their grandmother's legacy. Every step brought them closer to potentially life-changing revelations. Baker Beach was relatively empty when they arrived, the chilly fog keeping most tourists away. They spread out, combing the sand for anything unusual. After an hour of fruitless searching, Emma called out, "Guys, I think I found something." The others rushed over to where she was kneeling in the sand, brushing away grit from a small metal box. With trembling hands, Michael pried open the box. Inside was a faded photograph of a woman who bore a striking resemblance to their grandmother, standing in front of a small bookshop. On the back was written, Elizabeth's Haven, 1968. "This must be Aunt Elizabeth," Sarah whispered, tracing the woman's face with her finger. Beneath the photo was a small key and a slip of paper with an address in the No Valley neighborhood. Heart pounding, the siblings made their way to the address. As they turned onto the quiet, tree-lined street, they found themselves standing in front of a charming little bookstore called Haven Books. "This can't be a coincidence," Michael said, his voice filled with awe. They entered the shop, a bell chiming softly above the door. The interior was warm and inviting, filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the comforting smell of old paper. An elderly woman emerged from the back room, her silver hair tied back in a loose bun. "Can I help you?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with kindness. Emma stepped forward, her voice shaking slightly. "We're looking for information about Elizabeth Hawthorne. She might have owned this shop a long time ago." The woman's eyes widened in surprise. "Elizabeth Hawthorne? I haven't heard that name in years. Are you related to her?" Michael nodded. "We're her sister's grandchildren. We've recently learned about her and we're trying to find out what happened to her." The woman smiled softly. "Well, you've come to the right place. My name is Grace Chin. Elizabeth was my dear friend and the previous owner of this shop. Please come into the back. We have a lot to talk about." As they followed Grace, the siblings exchanged glances, each feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. They were on the verge of uncovering the final pieces of their family puzzle. Grace led them to a cozy office and gestured for them to sit. Elizabeth came to San Francisco in the mid-1950s, lost and alone. She started working here at the bookshop, eventually buying it from the previous owner. She renamed it Haven because that's what it had become for her, a safe haven from her past. The siblings listened intently as Grace continued. "Elizabeth never talked much about her family, but I knew she carried a great sadness. She threw herself into her work, building this place into a community hub. She never married, but..." Grace paused, a fond smile crossing her face. "She did have a daughter, Lily, born in 1953. The revelation hit the Hawthorne siblings like a thunderbolt. They did have a cousin. "Is Lily still alive? Is she here in San Francisco?" Emma asked eagerly. Grace's smile faltered. "Lily moved away years ago after Elizabeth passed. Last I heard, she was living in Seattle, but she still owns this building. In fact," she stood up and went to a filing cabinet, pulling out an envelope. "Elizabeth left this, to be given to any family members who might come looking." With shaking hands, Michael opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a small key. "My dear family, if you're reading this, it means Evelyn has finally shared our story. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused and the years of silence. I hope you can forgive me. I've instructed Grace to give you this key. It opens a safety deposit box at the Bank of America on Castro Street. Inside, you'll find letters I wrote to Evelyn over the years but never sent, and documents about Lily. Lily is the best thing I've ever done. She doesn't know much about our family history. I was too ashamed to tell her. But she deserves to know her roots and to meet her family. I hope this helps you understand why I left and why I stayed away. Know that I always loved you all, even from afar. With all my love, Elizabeth." As Michael finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Decades of family secrets had finally come to light, bringing with them a mix of sorrow, understanding, and hope. The next few days passed in a whirlwind for the Hawthorne siblings. They retrieved the contents of the safety deposit box, poring over Elizabeth's unsent letters and learning about the cousin they'd never known. Lily, they discovered, was a successful environmental lawyer in Seattle with 2 children of her own. After much discussion, they decided to reach out to Lily. The phone call was emotional and awkward, but ended with plans for a family reunion back in Millbrook. As they prepared to leave San Francisco, the siblings made one last stop at Haven Books. Grace met them with a smile and 4 jars of homemade jam. Elizabeth's special recipe, she explained. She made it every summer, said it reminded her of home. Back in Millbrook, they gathered once more in their grandmother's cellar. Michael picked up the final jar of Evelyn's jam, labeled December 31st, New Beginnings. The note attached reads simply, "The circle closes, the truth unfolds. In understanding, new love takes hold. Family lost and family found. In sweetness, let all wounds be bound." Ethan chuckled softly. Grandma always did have a flair for the dramatic. As they ascended the cellar stairs, each carrying a jar of jam, one from Evelyn, one from Elizabeth, they felt the weight of their family history, but also the promise of a new chapter. The day of the reunion arrived, bringing with it a mix of nerves and excitement. Lily and her children fit seamlessly into the family gathering, as if they'd always been a part of it. Stories were shared, tears were shed, and laughter echoed through the old house. As the day wound down, the extended Hawthorne family gathered in the backyard. Michael stood, raising a glass of sweet tea. "To Grandma Evelyn and Aunt Elizabeth," he began. "Their love, their pain, and their courage brought us all here today. And to family old and new, lost and found." Emma chimed in, "And to Jam, for preserving more than just fruit." Laughter rippled through the group as they toasted. As the sun set over Millbrook, casting a golden glow over the gathering, the Hawthorne family felt whole in a way they never had before. The bitterness of old secrets had been transformed, like alchemy, into the sweetness of understanding and newfound connections. In the kitchen, jars of jam from both sisters sat side by side on the counter, a testament to the enduring bonds of family, the healing power of truth, and the unexpected ways love can preserve us all. Thank you for listening until the end. Share your opinion about the story in the comments and let us know which character you liked the most. If this story touched you and you want to hear more, click on the next story appearing on your screen. Leave a like and subscribe to our channel so we can build a great community of people who share emotional stories together. Until the next story.